Verdict reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Aaron York Dean guilty of the offense of manslaughter, as signed by the presiding juror.
Well, in case you missed it, that was a guilty verdict, and I've never seen one read so quickly, even with a bumble on the name, and it was over. Aaron Dean found guilty of manslaughter in the case against him in Fort Worth, Texas. This former police officer found guilty after 13 hours of jury deliberation. So today, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the jury back on the sentencing or the penalty phase. They've heard everything they're going to hear. Now they're in the midst of wrangling their recommendation. The state did present witnesses this morning, and the defense also presented a witness. This guy's looking at up to life in prison for, actually, I think with manslaughter, it's a 20-year max. And this shooting happened just a couple years ago. Again, Atatiana Jefferson was the victim there. The key to this case, I think, and luckily I have, before I get into that, Richard Schoenstein here with me on the set, litigator from the New York area, and Katherine Lizardo, trial attorney in Fort Worth, Dallas area, both here to help me figure this out. Let me start with you, Richard. 13 hours to deliberate on the guilt phase. They're now chewing on the penalty phase. What do you think they may have wrangled over? Because it was really just a question of obviously not guilty or guilty of the premeditated or the intentional murder or the manslaughter. So not like they had 76 counts to go through. What do you think took up the time?
You're exactly right. It's not a complicated case on the facts, but it was a complicated case on the philosophy of it and debating. And I bet there was a lot of debate in that jury room between those possibilities of a conviction for murder, a conviction for manslaughter, or a finding of innocent, and the possibility of a hung jury. And this sounds like it was a compromise, right? That some jurors may have had different opinions. They debated it for a number of hours, and they reached a result that everybody in the room could live with. That's not uncommon in a jury room. Sometimes your verdicts are by bargain, and I suspect that's what happened here.
Yeah, you know, I think all jurors feel better that they came to a decision of some sort. And I think here, and this will help us, I think, figure out whether there was truly a compromise, Katherine. If they recommend the higher range in the 20 years, that maybe there were a lot of folks looking for the higher conviction at an intentional murder. If it's on the lower range, then maybe they were more in concert on less than intentional murder and they came out at manslaughter. Any thought, or am I just out of it?
Well, it will definitely give us an idea as to whether there was a compromise there, because manslaughter, as you mentioned, is between 2 years to 20 years in prison. Now, I agree here that when the jury was trying to deliberate for only 13 hours, I think they were also trying to figure out whether Tatiana actually raised her gun. During the jury deliberation, they asked for Post-its and pictures. And there were a lot of pictures that the state used during the rebuttal to show whether or not Tatiana's hands were injured during the shooting. And if it was injured and it has glasses, shards of glasses from the window, that indicated that she raised her hand and pointed the gun at Dean, which wasn't showing on her injury.
So let me ask you generally, this is the yes or no part of the show. Rich, surprised at the verdict or no?
No, not surprised. This is where I thought they were headed.
That's more than one word, Richard. You continue to violate the rules.
You cannot ask me for one word. It's just not possible.
It's an attorney thing. I understand. Yeah. Okay, Katherine, your turn. Are you surprised at the verdict?
No.
Very good. So easy.
Come on.
No,
making me look bad.
I got a warning there before I answered with 4 words, but he was asking for 3 words only.
I know. I'm such a tyrant. Okay, so now let's take a look at the sentencing hearing. Okay, that started this morning. There was some testimony from a forensic psychologist, Kyle Clayton, the name, and they testified that the defendant was not psychologically suitable to serve as an officer in the first place. I'm still trying to cogitate how that factors into the sentencing, but let's go into court and listen to some of that testimony.
I was provisionally licensed in 2012, fully licensed in 2013.
And what is the difference between being a clinical or a psychologist and a forensic psychologist?
Clinical psychology typically deals with assessment and treatment, whereas forensic psychology is the assessment and/or treatment as it applies to the law. So mental health as applied to legal issues.
So in total, how long have you been board certified in the area of forensic psychology?
Since 2021.
And where do you currently work, sir?
At Price Proctor in Dallas
And how long have you worked there?
since 2012.
And is that, as far as forensic psychology, is that the area in which you work at Price Proctor?
Yes.
Have you testified before as a forensic psychologist?
Yes.
In this courtroom with this particular judge?
I have testified with this particular judge, yes.
And have you testified on few or many occasions as a forensic psychologist?
I would say many occasions. I guess it depends on how you define that.
Have you testified before for the state as well as the defense?
Yes.
Have you actually testified as an expert in the area of forensic psychology for this particular defense attorney?
I've worked with this defense attorney on several cases. I don't recall if I've testified in court for them before, but I have worked with them before.
When you say worked with them, have they hired you to review or to do forensic psychology in the past?
Yes, many times.
And in this particular case, did you do a psychological exam on this defendant, Aaron Dean?
Yes.
When did that exam take place, sir?
It was in March of 2017.
And what was the purpose of you doing that exam on Aaron Dean?
It was a pre-employment psychological evaluation in terms of his applicancy to be a law enforcement officer for Fort Worth Police Department.
In your role as a forensic psychologist with Price and Proctor, have you done pre-employment psychological evaluations before?
Yes, many.
Is that a big part of what you guys do there?
Yes.
Okay. And in this particular case, you said it was March of 2017. What types of evaluation procedures do you go through when you're conducting this evaluation?
In general, this type of evaluation includes a review of available records, typically a personnel packet and a job description, an interview and background review, and then also psychological testing.
Is there a recognized type of testing that needs to be done in order to be verified by the state of Texas or by your governing board, if you will?
Yes, well, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement provides some standards in terms of what needs to be done.
He needs to remain outside in the hallway. Go ahead, Dr. Clayton, I'm sorry.
So the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement provides some standards in terms of what needs to be completed, including there needs to be an assessment of psychopathology, an assessment of normal or universal personality traits, and an interview that takes place following the testing.
And is that what you did if you followed those particular items on March of 2017 with this defendant?
Yes.
And did you complete a report regarding the results of his psychological exam?
Yes, I did.
Who's in there? Who's in the vestibule? That's not a phone booth.
May I proceed?
Yes, go ahead, Christina.
After you did the psychological exam, was there a result to the findings of that exam for this defendant?
Yes, there was.
Do you see the defendant, the person, Aaron Dean, that you did this exam on? Do you see him in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And will you point to him and identify an article of clothing he has on?
He's there in a suit and what appears to be a blue tie.
And is he the individual that just stood up at counsel table?
Yes.
Your Honor, will the record reflect that this is identified the defendant as the individual he conducted the psychological exam on?
Record will so reflect.
And what was your conclusion of the psychological exam?
My conclusion was that he was not psychologically suitable to serve as a police officer.
Once that conclusion is made and the report is generated, where is it sent, if anywhere?
It's sent to the agency or department that requested the evaluation. So in this case, Fort Worth Police Department.
And outside of meeting with us and going through your file, have you done anything else as far as any other psychological evaluations of this defendant?
No, I've not.
No other work on the case?
No.
For purpose of this hearing, Your Honor, I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Doctor.
Morning.
What did you review in preparation for your testimony today?
I reviewed my file and my records that I had on the case.
Okay, so next question, what's in your file?
The personnel packet, my interview form, my report, everything they sent over records-wise, which included a polygraph, personnel packet, job description.
Okay. Would you take a look at the packet I have here?
Yes.
And tell me if that contains everything you reviewed?
Thing I noticed is the personnel packet that they sent me from the agency or the department.
Okay, what would be contained in the personnel packet?
It's answers to questions that they fill out in terms of their background and history.
Okay, getting a little choppy audio there, so we're going to take this opportunity to answer the question, what the heck's going on here? This is a doctor who's testifying essentially to two things. First of all, this is a voir dire process outside the presence of the jury. The court wants to find out what this guy expects to say when he does, if he does testify, and then pare it down if he needs to, so that when the jury comes back in, they hear only what the judge believes is relevant and appropriate for the sentencing phase in this Aaron Dean trial. So, Richard Schoenstein here. He's a litigator. Katherine Lizardo is here. She is a trial attorney. I was just scratching my head, thinking, okay, if the prosecution called this guy, Katherine, what's the point? This guy says Dean should never have been a cop. That was a screw up in the department. How does that carry through and help this jury decide on a sentence?
Well, in the sentencing phase, I was also bewildered as to why the state called him. The opinion of this forensic psychologist was that he was not suitable to be a police officer because he was a narcissist, which for him, he's testified that he would have poor judgment and poor decision making and poor relationship skills. I think the prosecution is trying to elicit that he's a narcissist and would be a danger to society if he has a smaller sentence. But I'm wondering why they didn't present him in the guilt phase. That would have helped the guilt phase. That he wasn't supposed to be a cop to begin with.
Yeah, it might have given the jury somebody else to blame. Like, don't hold him responsible because the department screwed up here. They should never have put this guy in a uniform. Rich, what do you think? Is this is the attempt here for the jury to punish Aaron Dean for the department's mishandling of his hiring?
That, to me, would be a baffling way for the prosecution to go, because if I'm the defense, I'm going to say if it's the department's fault, then it's not Dean's fault. And if he never should have been a cop, then the problem is solved, because no matter how many years you put him in prison for, whether it's 2 or 20, he's not going to be a cop anymore. And if that's really what we're worried about, we've accomplished our objective. There's no point in having him in prison for 20 years. It's not like we think he's about to go on a killing spree. And I hope they're not just putting people in jail for being narcissists. I personally would be a little worried about that.
Well, I appreciate your introspective take there. That's very good. So we're going to find out what this judge